A quick programming note, our big special edition of the Mark Steyn show with victims of the COVID vaccines was supposed to air yesterday, but Sajid Javid, the health secretary who's been refusing to come on this show for 2 months because he's been washing his hair, he recognised that excuse was becoming implausible and decided to get out of giving us an interview by precipitating a total government meltdown. So our vaccine victim special had to be postponed, and we'll do it for you next week, and you won't want to miss that, because unlike the comings and goings of hacks and mediocrities, it may actually affect your life. As to politics, all political lives, said Enoch Powell, end in failure, because that is the nature of all politics and of all human affairs. And that is true. You can ask Tony Blair and Mrs. Thatcher and Jim Callaghan and Harold Macmillan and Anthony Eden. You can ask John Howard down under and Brian Mulroney in Canada. You can ask Charles de Gaulle and Helmut Kohl in Europe. But has political failure ever been as total as Boris Johnson's? It's supposed to be a 5-act tragedy, not a Eurostar Express hurtling from 80-seat majority to total humiliation in 20 minutes flat. The things other fallen politicians do in retirement, newspaper columns, good-natured appearances on Have I Got News For You, panto in Cleethorpes, Boris did all that on the way up, enduring them because they advanced his ambitions. He doesn't want to go back there, or at least not for another 30 years or so. He's in early middle age, and he's as dead as Sir Henry Campbell Bannerman or Bonar Law or Neville Chamberlain or any of those other short-reigning prime ministers who expired as soon as they'd left number 10. That's rather poignant. Or it would be if right to the end he insisted on not getting it. My American chum, Ann Coulter, who was one of the first supporters of Donald Trump, warned the president very early on in his term that, quote, nobody voted for Trump's children. She didn't like the way he was delegating stuff to his non-conservative kids, principally Ivanka and Jared. I have no idea why in his death throes Boris delegated it to his even less conservative dad, the woeful Stanley Johnson, to whom it fell to make the last-minute case for saving his premiership.
I'm here to praise Boris, not to bury him. But I think if you look at it, if you look at the facts, the achievements have been extraordinary. There have been Brexit, whatever you think, Brexit was done. There's been COVID, whatever you think of that, COVID was done. There's Ukraine, and for my money, there's been the environment, biodiversity, climate change. These are big issues. And what are we doing? We're derailing the man who has led all that for what appears to be completely inconsequential reasons. I mean,
Environment, biodiversity, climate change, these are big issues, says Johnson Pair. Not when there's a cost of living crisis caused by the cost of lockdown, not when your electric bills and petrol costs are through the roof, not when you haven't seen your GP for 2 years. Good God. Come on, you grassroots Tories. Let's stick with the rock-ribbed conservative who's hot for net zero and thinks there's nothing wrong with the Kremlin that wouldn't be solved by getting Vladimir Putin to transition out of his toxic masculinity into something closer to Jacinda Ardern. That's a Tory leader? Well, yeah, it is. And all the clever people want the next Tory leader, whether it be Jeremy Mordaunt or Rishi Tugendhat or whoever, to be the same, only more so. Do you think we need more knee-taking to the climate gods and more lockdowns funded by inflation and borrowing? Then this is the party for you. Johnson may have squandered the last 3 years, but collectively the Tories have squandered the last 12 years. The pendulum swings. 18 years of Thatcherite conservatism, 13 years of New Labour. But generally, after the pendulum swung, your supporters have something to show for it. Not so much after a dozen years of hollow conservatism punctuated by a Brexit referendum the Euro-Tory establishment thought they'd win. So the pendulum is about to swing again, unless the Tories can pull off a 5th consecutive election victory, something which hasn't been done in 2 centuries. You'd have to go back before the 1832 Reform Act, to the Pittites, the Duke of Portland et al., although I'm sure David Starkey will tell me why that precedent is a total overstretch. For one thing, in those days they had a so-called Ministry of all the talents, as opposed to the Ministry of all the no talents that has left us with the highest tax burden in 80 years, the biggest public debt increase in history, and a National Health Service reduced to the world's most lavishly funded Zoom call. Screw it! I want no part of 2010's conservatism. No one who has been part of the last 12 squandered years should be eligible for leadership. That's why, as I've said, you need to think outside the box and bring in Tony Abbott from down under, or at any rate someone else untainted by the wasted Cameron May Johnson years. Otherwise, Keir Starmer and the Ginger Growler are going to be in Downing Street, and sooner than you think. Let me know your take. You can email me, gbviews at gbnews.uk.